Halloween here on BBC One, and Jonathan Ross is spending it with Dermot O'Leary, Alicia Keys and the Flaming Lips at 10:35.
Good evening and welcome to Have I Got News For You? I'm John Humphrys. In the news this week, during a live report, ITN's man in Iraq learns the hard way about the dangers of dumbing down. In Texas, there's disappointment for George Bush's daughter when he finally buys her that pony she's always wanted. And in Florida, there are fears that Al-Qaeda have been training piranha fish. With Ian Hislop tonight is a stand-up comedian who's come a long way since ditching his early partners, Steve Stock and Billy Barrell. Please welcome Sean Locke. And on Paul Merton's team is a television presenter and property expert whose advice when viewing a house is imagine yourself cooking in the kitchen, washing in the bathroom and sleeping in the bedroom. A radical approach, but it might just catch on. Please welcome Kirstie Allsopp. And we start with round one. Ian and Sean, what's going on here?
Duncan Smith out for a duck. Bitter. Very. Oh, these are the letters, is that right? To the Chief Whip. And there's the man who's going to lose the next election. IDS, the quiet man, has finally had the volume turned off completely.
He had no chance, did he? I always thought he looked like a Kinder egg with no toy in it.
Did you see the comment that he made on being the leader yesterday? He said, anyone who wants to be leader of the opposition needs their head examined.
So, Michael Howard, then.
We have to be clear about where our allegiance lies, and I'm there now with that. I'm saying, yeah, definitely. Boris Johnson is the man to lead this country back to the 17th century. I want to see a nation full of befuddled people who really don't know what's going on.
They said the leader needed his head examined, not the followers.
Why did Michael Howard stay out of the limelight for so long?
Well, Anne Widdecombe once said that he had something of the night about him, which was one of those political aperçus that I don't know what it means, really.
Well,
Aperçus?
Yeah.
I had one of them and the wheels fell off it.
Yeah. I don't know much about politics, I don't do a lot. I mean, I don't know who's in charge.
Then vote Boris!
Yeah.
He's a candidate for people who don't know much about politics.
But I don't know much about Michael Howard, but I have seen him dance. I went to this very posh wedding, very complicated circumstances. I was in the marquee business for a while. He skanked. He was dancing to reggae in a field.
You see, this is the sort of leader the Tories need. Vote Howard, he can skank.
Yeah.
The Daily Mirror did have its own explanation for why he stayed out of the limelight. Something of the night about him?
Isn't he from Transylvania?
He is an immigrant, isn't he?
He is.
Yeah. Or his
He's
parents were
Welsh,
immigrants.
actually, but that's... I'm delighted that none of you has had the bad taste to bring up the question of the famous interview.
Paxman.
That's
He's
the
awfully
name.
good.
What I want to know is, when Michael Howard had this dispute with Derek Lewis, did he threaten to overrule him?
Let's see it.
I did not overrule Derek
Did you
Lewis.
threaten to overrule him?
I took advice on what I could or could not do.
Did you threaten
and
to
I
overrule him,
acted
Mr. Howard?
scrupulously in accordance with that advice. I did not overrule Derek
Did you
Lewis.
threaten to overrule
Mr.
him?
Marriott was not suspended.
Did you threaten to overrule him?
I have accounted for my decision to dismiss Derek Lewis.
Did you threaten
in
to
great
overrule him?
detail before the House of Commons.
I note you're not answering the question whether you threatened
Well,
to overrule him.
The important aspect of it, which is very clear to bear in mind,
I'm sorry, I'm going to be
Is this-
frightfully rude, but...
Yes, you
but
can-
I'm saying, it's a quick, straight
you
yes
can
or
put the
no.
question and I
It's
will-
a
I will
straight
give
yes or
you-
no
I will give you an
Did you
answer.
threaten to overrule him?
I discussed this matter with Derek Lewis.
Jeremy Paxman got like a string in his back. Someone's kept pulling it. Did you threaten to overrule him? Did you threaten to overrule him?
This is the news that Ian Duncan Smith is no longer the leader of the Tory party, according to my notes. Apparently he was at one stage. David Davis has already announced that he's not going to stand for leader. In its profile on David Davis, The Independent wrote he is tall and well-groomed, although he's had his nose broken 5 times. And that was just on Wednesday. The Sun gave its own in-depth analysis of the leadership crisis, featuring Muckle Buzz Lightyear Portillo and Oliver Potato Head Letwin. Coincidentally, bookmakers have now increased the odds on the Tories winning the next election to infinity and beyond. Paul and Kirstie, you'll have to dig deep for this one.
Estate agent.
A man showing him around where you could just knock that through, you see, and you'll
Yep,
be fine, isn't it?
yep. Bank of England.
There's
Oh,
bank
and there's
account
a
details,
credit card bill.
details. There's a man who says, oh, I
That's this is about the debt time bomb.
yeah.
We're all borrowing far too much.
We are. So how much did we borrow last month?
26 billion.
That's a lot.
It is when you are borrowing it from an old age pensioner in Rotherham.
And what are we borrowing it for?
Fast cars and trips to Morocco.
And?
And houses.
So it's your fault,
It's totally my fault, yeah.
because you know that some pretty sharp practice has been going
Yeah.
on.
Some lenders connected to estate agents have been accused of encouraging people to lie about their
That
income.
was jolly carefully put. Lenders connected to estate agents. Don't you mean the Halifax? It's your salary you exaggerate.
Yeah, no.
Do you do a lot of that?
No,
Kirstie?
luckily I'm not an estate agent.
You're not.
Or a money lender.
But you're kind of associated with them, aren't you? You know? You mentioned the Barclay boss, Matt Barrett. He was being very honest, wasn't he? Advised us not to borrow money on a credit card.
Yeah.
His own credit card.
Well, his own credit card is very near the upper limit, so there's
Yeah.
no point in you know.
Matthew Barrett was recently in trouble after admitting he does not use a Barclay card because they're too expensive. Instead, he cleverly gets around the problem by awarding himself a £6 million a year salary. So, at the end of that round, Ian and Sean have 2 points, and Paul and Kirstie have 2 points. And so to round 2,
John?
and yes, Ian.
You know when you're on the Today programme
Yes,
and
Ian.
you have a guest on
Yes.
to talk about one thing?
Yes.
And you say, well, look, while you're here, can we do something else?
You're not going to be rude to me, are
No,
you?
it's just you do Mastermind now, don't you?
I do.
Well, we thought while you were here... Your name, please.
John Humphrys.
Mr. Humphrys, your specialist subject is the life and times of John Humphrys, and your time starts now. Who said in an interview earlier this year, to lose your temper is unforgivable?
John Humphrys.
Correct. And what did he then do during the Today programme on the morning of Friday the 17th of October this year?
It was reported in the newspapers that he threatened to resign.
He lost his temper, didn't he, John? He was heard shouting in the background, according to The Guardian.
Why
The
would
issue
I have
wa-
shouted according to The Guardian?
What phrase did you use to describe the England football team during the 2002 World Cup? You said they were a bunch of overpaid tossers.
And?
And is that still your view?
Pass.
In 1995, what did you give as a present to the then Chancellor of the Exchequer, Ken Clarke?
A calculator, and when I handed it to him, the Chancellor of the Exchequer said, "Oh, what's this?" I said, "It's a calculator." He said, "Ah, I've never really figured out how to work one of these things."
In 1995, who suggested the BBC should be renamed the Blair Broadcasting Corporation and accused you of ego trip interviewing?
Jonathan Aitken.
Subsequently convicted for perjury. By 2002, how many invitations to appear on the Today programme had Tony Blair turned down since coming to power?
Couldn't count.
40. How many times has Blair appeared on Breakfast with Frost?
45.
19.
Close.
On the Today programme on 2002...
You're meant to say I've started, so I'll finish.
I've started, so I'll finish.
Either that or the microwave's ready.
Someone had a go at you, remarking ironically about your nice, balanced package. Who was that?
I never did find out her name.
It was Ian Duncan Smith. And at the end of that, Mr. Humphrys, your score is who cares?
That's what Premiership football is called a roasting.
And so to round 2, and the tabloids. Ian and Sean, do see you in court.
I assume it's got something to do with The Simpsons, which is pronounced dope. Just a little detail there. It's not like dough, he's not even listening, is he? But I assume... It's not the radio, John. You can see you. You can't see it picking your nose. I'm working! I assume it's something to do with The Simpsons. The Simpsons are suing somebody because they've copied them, I don't know this.
They're being sued by someone. The Simpsons did an episode in which they laughed at Fox News, which is an incredibly right-wing American news channel. And Fox News were not amused and threatened to sue, but they'd forgotten that The Simpsons is produced by Fox Entertainment. Which, to some of us, would have been wonderful, because it would have been Murdoch suing Murdoch and then losing a stack of money. But sadly, it didn't happen.
Who else has been sued by Fox News recently?
There's an American comic called Al Franken.
Do you know why?
Well, Al Franken wrote a book called Lies and the Lying Liars Who Tell Them. A fair and balanced look at the right. Which is a very funny book, but Fox News has the slogan, amusingly, fair and balanced. And Fox News thought they owned the copyright to the words fair and balanced.
Yeah, well, that's more or less it. The news from America that Fox Television threatened to sue itself after an episode of The Simpsons poked fun at Fox News. Since the incident, Fox has banned The Simpsons from using on-screen scrolling news bars on the grounds that it might confuse viewers into thinking it was real news. More worrying still is the fact that many Americans actually think that the news shown on Fox News channel is real news. Paul and Kirstie off with his head. What are the new developments this week in the Burrell saga?
He wanted to meet up with the princes, and the princes wanted to meet up with him, but...
The Queen didn't approve of that.
No, they shouldn't tell anybody. They should seek up secretly. You know, Wimbledon dog track, go somewhere like that. Just behind trap 4 before the 8:30 race. But don't stand too near the trap, otherwise you get caught up in the mechanism and you're off and running.
Burrell's moving to
Is
Florida.
he?
Yeah.
Yes.
He's buying a £500,000 house in Florida.
Where's he going to get the money for that? Oh. Oh, that's right. There is this story which we can't be told, which I'm sure you know the truth of, John, about this great scandal that's going to bring the royal family down, but we can't be told what it is.
People like you shouldn't know, Paul,
No.
really.
Right, do it in
Just
mine.
for people like me.
First word, oh, blimey, really?
Checking my cufflinks.
I've heard it called many things in my time. Checking my cufflinks is a new one on me.
Butlers don't even do any cleaning, do they? They just...
No, they just sit around with their notebooks, as far as I can see. Burrell said he wanted to meet the princes, and he was going to give them a piece of his mind. It's not going to take long, is it?
Speaking from sympathy for the princes, my mother died when I was quite young, and we didn't have a butler, but if, say, the rag and bone man, just trying to make it a bit more light-hearted, if he'd written a book about her, I'd smash his face in. Wouldn't you? I mean, what's the point of being the future king if you can't dish out a beating every now and again?
Do we want to discuss how many, it's a rather sweet word, is it, suitors the princess was supposed to have had?
Was there 9?
But what is a suitor?
Fancy man.
Fancy man.
Uncle Bob to the kids. Leave the money on the mantelpiece, love, will you?
Like John Le Mesurier in Dad's Army. Yeah, I think, yeah.
Now we've got the terms of reference.
This is, of course, Paul Burrell, whose book has provoked an unprecedented reaction. It made people feel sorry for the royal family. In his book, Burrell describes how he accompanied Diana to Angola during her crusade against landmines, a trip the royal family would very much like him to repeat, only this time wearing really big shoes. Ian and Sean, Rod Rage.
Yeah, it's Rod Stewart getting his thong in a twist. He's trying to get a bit of attention for his new musical, and he's been complaining about people like Sting getting honours. And he's never had an honour, an MBE or an OBE, and Sir Paul McCartney has. And I mean, Jamie Oliver got one yesterday, didn't he? He got one. Apparently, he got in a bit of trouble because he didn't turn up with a tie on. That was disrespectful. I think it'd be much more disrespectful if he turned up with one of those Wallace and Gromit ties on. And one of those felt hats with a mallet coming out round the side. Big better than that. And also Paul McCartney's he's a dad,
Yes.
isn't he? He's getting 60, 63.
Yeah, this is how the Mirror covered that story, by the way. Great exclusive. The only slight problem is, of course, it was a girl, but...
Yeah. But you're quite an elderly dad, aren't you?
I'm not in the first flush of youth, that's absolutely true.
Right.
And I do have a 3-year-old, that's true.
What's that like, then?
It's that big and he's got... It's terrific, it's terrific.
Yeah.
Yeah, hard work.
Is it? Yeah, I bet it is. Because I'm imagining like Paul McCartney. It must be that point where you're bathing it, but it's not long before it's the other way round, is there? Lowering you into the bath like that. You all right, Dad? Yeah. Oh, it's too hot. Bring him up.
Anybody know what Rod's chat-up line is? He's got a good chat-up line. Well,
Are you blonde? Yeah. Are you blind? Do you think I'm 60?
That business of Rod slagging off all those other pop stars, I mean, why was he doing it, do you think?
It alludes to the fact he's publicising his new musical, Tonight's the Night. If it closes after one night, that'd be quite
Ben
funny,
Elton.
wouldn't it? That was the night.
Yeah.
Ben
Elton wrote it, didn't he?
Yeah.
Ben Elton. And I went to see the Queen musical, which he wrote, which is just... It's awful. It's terrible. You know when you go to a theatre and you can pay 50p for some binoculars?
Yeah.
I'd have paid 10 quid for a Walkman and a blindfold. It was rubbish.
Was it bad?
Yeah. It was just a hopeless story. The whole plot hinges on one sentence where Nigel Planer says, well, what happened was the government banned rock and roll, so the kids lost interest in rebellion, so democracy died, but luckily, Queen buried some guitars in a mountain somewhere. If we go and find them, everything will be all right again. Yeah. And if you've gone out for a piss, it doesn't make any sense.
Mind you, a lot of shows could if you go out for a piss at the wrong time. Like Titanic, I went out for a piss in the middle of that, I came back, I thought, God, what's happened to the boat? It's all these people. Yeah. Why is his hair wet? Things like that. There's no clue in the title.
This is the Rod Stewart attack on Sting, Sir Paul McCartney and Sir Elton John, or Sharon, as he calls him. The other show of this event on Tuesday night was the National Television Awards. There was surprise at the end of the evening when Tony Blair came on stage clutching a trophy. He told the audience, this goes to a man admired and respected by everyone in the country. There was then an embarrassing pause as someone pointed out that he was supposed to hand it over to Trevor McDonald. Paul and Kirstie, Brock horror.
Yes, this is the story, wasn't it, of the family that was badgered by the badger.
Yeah, it was really horrid. A 12-year-old boy was chased 200 yards all the way home.
Yep.
He ran in, slammed the door in the badger's face, and then it...
The badger shot through the cat flap. The badger held him hostage, got hold of a potato peeler. The mum came home, the badger overpowered her, took over her identity and her credit cards. She was locked down in the cellar. When the husband came home, poor husband, a little bit pissed, walks in, sees a figure in the bed wearing a negligee, thinks to himself, is it Friday night already? And before you know where he is, he puts the light on and he goes, oh my God, I've f***ed the badger. And then he was arrested because the badger, of course, is a protected species. And
When Luke's stepfather arrived back home after the badger thing, do you know what he said?
You're looking particularly alluring tonight, my dear. That perfume's new, isn't it?
Yeah.
Have you been down the allotment? Those sort of things.
My grandma, what a white nose you've got.
What he actually said was, it's the stare which gave me the creeps. How was was he caught? Anybody know how they caught the
Oh,
badger?
yeah, with a jam sandwich.
Yeah, and his signature didn't match the back of the credit card. Coming out of Harvey Nichols, at 500 quid's worth of hats. The signature's completely wrong.
Yeah. And shaving brushes. He was buying his mates back.
Yeah, exactly. Family reunion.
All these shaving brushes out.
Uncle George, Terry, Mr. Peters.
They said they were terrorised for 2 hours. They were locked in their house for 2... I mean, you can sit in your house for 2 hours. What are you going to run out of? Kit Kats? Right, for 2 hours, what are we going to do? Well, watch a film.
Stick a DVD on.
Wait for the badger to piss off.
You see the other unusual animal in the news this week?
World's smallest hamster.
You got it in one. Pee-wee, the world's smallest hamster. There he is.
Oh. You don't get a lot of R's on this programme.
What you don't know, a couple of seconds later, that 50p fell over and killed him.
Crushed him to death. He's now the world's flattest hamster. Presumably he's getting bigger as the days go by, so the crown of the world's smallest hamster will soon be passed to somebody else, won't it?
No.
No?
No, he's got a rare hamster disease. That means he's only that big forever. God, 2 R's.
He's quite tough,
Someone
though,
dies horribly on the show, they all laugh. But in a small hamster, oh.
Yeah, but look at it.
Aren't the Bank of England thinking of replacing 50p bits with this hamster? Just to make your change more interesting when you go to the pub on a Saturday night.
Quite hard to get in the parking meter, though.
You'll adapt it. Just push it in when they're going with a surprised look at its face. So you can be standing there and your change is going to be slowly moving around in your pocket.
Rod Stewart would like that, wouldn't he?
Yeah, he would.
This is the badger who terrorised a Worcestershire family, laying siege to their home and trapping them inside for almost 3 hours. During the family's ordeal, the enraged badger repeatedly tried to break in through the cat flap, although this may have been to create a diversion while his mates Ratty and Mole were round the back nicking the video. And at the end of round 2, Ian and Sean have 6, Paul and Kirstie have 6. Good. This is the odd one out round next. Ian and Sean, your 4 are Alistair Campbell, Jim Davidson, JMW Turner, and a packet of puff pastry.
Jim Davidson recently was in the news because he ordered some disabled people in the front of his gig, and he said he didn't want them to be seated at the front.
Can't see JMW Turner saying that when it was his first hanging in the Royal
Yeah.
Academy. Get those disabled people out. Can you give us a clue?
Could have included the prisoner of Zenda.
Oh, doubles. They've all been mistaken for someone else.
Aha.
Jim Davidson does a lot of gigs for the troops. Has he been out to Iraq entertaining troops, and he's been mistaken for Saddam Hussein and been shot, hopefully.
Oh, there were some Turner pictures that were meant to be Venice, and they're actually Portsmouth.
Did not the big ferry boat give it away as a clue?
Yeah.
They have all been mistaken for something else, except JMW Turner, who had 2 paintings of Portsmouth mistaken for Venice. Alistair Campbell was mistaken for the Defence Secretary, Jeff Hoon. And apparently when Jim Davidson, who was in Iraq entertaining the troops in Iraq, he mistook him for the Prime Minister. And he said, I hate the man, but the Iraqi people love him.
He's got some cracking gags, hasn't he?
Yeah.
Must really eat you up, eh?
I hate Tony Blair, but the Iraqi people love him.
And the puff pastry?
Was mistaken for Semtex.
Yeah.
How could anybody mistake a bit of harmless innocent dough for lethal, highly dangerous Semtex, eh? Ridiculous, isn't it?
I don't know how it happened, but that piece of puff pastry set off a smoke gun.
Paul and Kirstie, your 4 are
Yep.
Britney Spears, Gavin Davis, chairman of the BBC, Mr. and Mrs. Allett of Conisborough, and the RMT.
They're looking well, aren't they, Mr. and Mrs. OK, we've got no idea. RMT, what's that?
I think it's about houses, because the RMT is the Rail, Maritime and Transport Union, which are trying to kick John Prescott out of one of his homes. And Gavin Davis has probably got a lot of homes, because he's the chairman of the BBC and a multi-millionaire. Britney Spears,
Buying a home in London.
Buying a home in London.
Yeah.
You see, it's homes in London.
Mr and Mrs Allett don't have a home in London because they bought a house in Crystal Palace on the side of a hill and it was on wheels and it went all the way down to and it's now in Middlesex, so it's not in London. So they're the odd one out because their house travelled 500 miles.
Well, you've got there by the wrong route. They are the odd one out. But the difference is they chose to leave their home. And the reason why they chose to leave their home, do we know?
Yes.
Yes? Go on.
Badgers impersonating them have convinced the local council that they were in fact the rightful owners.
They chose to leave their home because it is in Butthole Road.
Right. Is that a cul-de-sac? Is it?
What plans do the RMT have for John Prescott?
They're going to turn him into a theme park. They're going to take all his innards out and put in rides for the little kiddies. Have you not heard about it? Next time you interview him, ask him. Ask him. Ask him where he keeps the ghost train. Underprivileged kids from the northeast come down to London just to ride inside a deputy prime minister.
They've all taken legal action to evict someone, apart from Mr and Mrs Allett of Conisborough, who moved out of their home in Butthole Road in South Yorkshire because they got sick of people joking about it. During the Hutton inquiry, Chairman of the BBC, Gavin Davis, praised the integrity, impartiality and accuracy of the BBC's journalism. A fine quote from the best chairman the BBC has ever had. Right, Missing Words is the final round featuring this week's guest publication, Square Dancing Today. Here we go with, if you think square dancing is hard, imagine doing it on what?
Social security. Ecstasy. Vodka.
Ice.
Ice. Gents form a star in the middle. Whoa! Viagra.
A tractor is the answer. Square dancing is a good way of meeting American women, and a tractor is about the only way you can pull one. Next, what can induce aggression and paranoia?
The Today programme.
Correct.
Is it Anton Deck?
Is it together that they're a problem, or is it... Do you just think...
Do you know, if I met Ant, I wouldn't be sure it wasn't Deck.
Coffee. Coffee. Too much coffee. Well done. Next, you ain't danced till you've danced in what?
Anton Deck's underpants.
5-inch heels.
Wigan.
In Sam's pants. And there are Sam's pants. Next, why what can ruin your career?
Is it Beanie and Duncan Smith?
Morris dancing. I imagine they're their natural enemies, their arch enemies, aren't they?
Is it hosting quiz shows when you should know better?
The correct answer is standing beside a fat person. Research at Liverpool University claimed that people with obese partners are deemed to be less successful, insecure and more likely to be poor.
Because she's eating all the food.
And that brings us to the end of tonight's contest. And the final scores, Paul and Kirstie have 7 points. But Ian and Sean have 9 points. I leave you with the news that after his recent heart scare, Tony Blair takes delivery of a get-well present from Gordon Brown. In football, there's a welcome boost for Leeds United as they think they've discovered the new George Best. And after one too many requests for spare change, Robin Cook sends a beggar flying into a pond. Good night.
Dermot O'Leary, Alicia Keys and the Flaming Lips join Jonathan Ross after the news here on BBC One.